See what they say about God the Supreme here. The evolving God of time and space is putting together everything that's going on in time and space, which is experiential. He is synthesizing creature-creator identity. That's so strange and foreign? No. It's exactly what Jesus did down here. He synthesized creature-creator identity. Came here a divine son. In the course of his 30-odd years, he found out exactly what it was like to be a human being. He was born, he lived, he died. And that human nature is an eternal part of his divine nature. Jesus of Nazareth, Joshua ben Joseph, the carpenter, lives in the Creator Son. Oh, just think of that as taking place throughout the whole grand universe. The whole thing adds together in the Supreme Being, expressive of the deity of the Supreme. God the Supreme, to me, emphasizes his spirit personality and stands in contrast to the Almighty Supreme, which is his synthesizing experiential power, which is unifying with God the Supreme. To me, the term Supreme Being is the larger of the other two terms. But you won't find the papers strictly adhere to that. They many times do, but they may refer to God the Supreme in the overall sense, as they refer to the Universal Father in the overall sense, where technically they maybe should use the term first source and center. I think of the Father in relation to paradise. It's a loose use of the term. Number 5, God the Sevenfold is the evolutional aspect of deity. This is the adjustment which deity makes to the conditions as they obtain. In this universe age, we deal with God the Sevenfold. The last half of this paper emphasizes the personality and the spirit nature of the Father. Second paper continues the story. It discusses his infinity and his perfection, his justice and righteousness, and concludes with a discussion of mercy, love, goodness, truth, and beauty. Always throughout these papers, whenever they encounter the problem of justice versus mercy, they point out that this is a love-dominated universe. Sure, God is a judge, but they say God as a father transcends God as a judge. When they're talking about the adjudication of mortal survival, they say in case of doubt, we always rule in favor of the creature. They say we would cheerfully risk another Lucifer rebellion rather than to err against mercy. They say we don't claim to administer justice in flawless perfection, but we do claim to administer it in mercy. I don't think God's absolute attributes are discussable in finite language. Finest analysis of the difference between a Havana native and an ascendant finaliter. Especially the third paragraph, where they choose such words as Havoners are brave but not courageous, kind but hardly altruistic in the human way, expect a pleasant future, but they're not hopeful, as we have learned to hope. They have faith, but they're utter strangers to the kind of saving faith which we have to have. They love the truth, but they never experienced salvation through the embrace of truth. They were idealists, but they never knew what it was to become an idealist and to experience the thrill of embracing ideals. They're loyal, but they were never really tempted to default. They know nothing about the challenge of loyalty. They're unselfish, but they never became that way through the conquest of selfishness. Sure, they enjoy the sweetness of pleasure, but they know nothing of how pleasant pleasure can be as an escape from pain. What they're discussing here in comparing Havoners and finaliters, they're discussing two kinds of maximum finites. Page 1158. Look down the page at the two italicized paragraph headings. We're discussing finite reality, and they're contrasting primary maximums and secondary maximums. A primary maximum is something like a Havona native, naturally born perfect. A secondary maximum is something like a finaliter, a being who has achieved perfection experientially. And it's interesting to read on. They say that there is a tertiary maximum. I think of those as the creature trinitized sons. Just make a cross-reference here to page 360, paragraph 3, the evolutionary idea. This is in the paper on the evolution of local universes, and it discusses the relationship between the beings of perfection and the beings of evolution. The relationship between Havona and the seven super-universes. Can't they use language, though? You know, you really can't explain a Havona native to us, but you get a feeling for them here, don't you? And, you know, these papers make an appeal to honest self-respect, not to pride and ego. But as I read these paragraphs, I'm glad I'm a man. You know? You recall that the Alphaeus twins knew they were the least of the 12 apostles and felt cheerful about it? It's words like this that enable one to accept his imperfections and feel cheerful about them. Not smug or lethargic, but cheerful. I think the last section in the paper on the attributes of God is one of the great pieces of philosophic writing in these papers, as well as a great piece of rhetoric. Read that first paragraph. Against the light of all that we've discussed. With divine selflessness, consummate generosity, the Universal Father relinquishes authority and delegates power, but he is still primal. His hand is on the mighty lever of the circumstances of the universal realms. He has reserved all final decisions and unerringly wields the all-powerful veto scepter of his eternal purpose with unchallengeable authority over the welfare and destiny of the outstretched, whirling, and ever-circling creation. The sovereignty of God is unlimited. It is the fundamental fact of all creation. Over on the next page. Does God suffer? Now you see the divine counselor is considering the whole nature of God here. How How could God suffer on the top floor of the firehouse? Or maybe even on the second floor? But maybe on the first floor? Maybe on the first floor, God does not choose to know the end from the beginning. Even as the human mind of Jesus, during his public ministry, sometimes did not choose to know the content of the divine mind of Michael. Sometimes he did, sometimes he did not. The divine counselor says he doesn't know, but he thinks he does.
What page are you under?
53. Last paragraph in this paper they engage in one of the most beautiful descriptions of the deity of the first source and center in contrast to the personality of God. This paragraph starts out by discussing broadly the deity of the first source and center. It concludes with a portraiture of the personal nature of the first source and center. He's power, form, energy, process, pattern, principle, presence, and idealized reality. But he's more. He's personal, exercises a sovereign will, experiences self-consciousness of divinity, executes the mandates of a creative mind, pursues the satisfaction of the realization of an eternal purpose, and manifests a father's love and affection for his universe children. Then they say, if you want to understand that, study the life and teachings of Jesus. In that life and in those teachings, these truths are completely comprehensible and wholly experienceable. And then this paper closes with what I guess you folks call it the same as we do. In Chicago, we've learned to call it the benediction. With one little modification, I don't use sons in the plural. I've spoken this in many churches. I've concluded many a talk by reciting this benediction. It's a wonderful piece of rhetoric. It's a beautiful expression of the interaction of the three paradise deities. You know, I think these so-called tough papers up here are real exciting and real beautiful. This language is exquisite in spots. And having discussed his attributes, they say, all right, how is he related to the universe? Paper 4 talks about his attitudes, his unchanging character, his relation to nature, and oh, how in that section they dynamite pantheism. Remember when they point out nature is scarred, her beautiful face is marred by all the erroneous choices of creatures, as well as exhibiting the beauty of a divine purpose. God is in nature, but nature is not God. Elsewhere in the papers they say when man discovers God in nature, this is proof that that man has first discovered God in his own heart. Having found God, you can observe him in nature, but you never find him there. The discussion of God and nature is really the stand which the Urantia papers make against pantheism. This is not a pantheistic God. I think one of the best illustrations of pantheism is taken from Hindu teachings. And it shows how slippery the human mind can be in rationalizing. Says the teacher to the pupil, says the pupil to the teacher, "But teacher, if God is everywhere, and if I am God, and God is in the elephant, why did the elephant almost run me down yesterday?" And the teacher replies, "But did you not see God also riding in the form of the elephant driver, warning you to get out of the way?" This is not logic, this is rationalization. God's character simply doesn't change. He's not whimsical. He's not fluctuating. You know, in many ways, this is a discussion of the gospel according to Melchizedek. When this local universe son came down here to lay the foundation for Michael's bestowal, you know, somewhere on earth there had to be a concept of God which was sufficiently decent so that Michael could say, "This is my father," and then proceed to grow it and elaborate on it. I think Melchizedek wisely concentrated on a basic idea. God is dependable. God is moral. God is not whimsical. You make a contract with God, He will keep His end of the bargain. Until you trust God, you can't love Him, can you? This, in a sense, is a discussion of the gospel according to Melchizedek, God's unchanging character. When they speak about the realization of God, well, read that first paragraph on page 58 under the caption. God is the only stationary, self-contained, and changeless being in the whole universe of universes, having no outside, no beyond, no past, and no future. You know, they're trying to talk a little bit about the third floor of the firehouse here, aren't they? And when you say this, you're talking about a being you can't understand. And then they contrast this. God's absoluteness, second paragraph, page 59. God's absoluteness pervades all 7 levels of universe reality. And the whole of His absolute nature is subject to the relationship of the Creator to His universe creature family. Precision may characterize Trinitarian justice in the universe of universes, but in all His vast family relationships with the creatures of time, the God of universes is governed by divine sentiment. First and last, eternally, the infinite God is a Father. Of all the possible titles by which He might appropriately be known, I have been instructed to portray the God of all creation as the universal Father. You know, I don't know, but I'll bet these divine counselors had some long discussions with their ascendant associates. I'll bet a cookie that he talked to the mighty messengers attached to this commission. See, a divine counselor operates under the handicap of never having been human. A mighty messenger is an ex-mortal. Let's turn to page 1153. And take a look at the counterpoint of this point. Paragraph 4. Ever remember that man's comprehension of the universal Father is a personal experience. God, as your spiritual Father, is comprehensible to you and to all other mortals. But your experiential, worshipful concept of the universal Father must always be less than your philosophic postulate of the infinity of the first source and center, the I am. Power, principle, presence, process, idealized reality. You can feel what you love, but you know that what you love is much less than all that is there. This is the difference, I think, between the truth of God and the fact of God. And again, over on page 59, third from the last paragraph, we crave the concept of the infinite, but we worship the experience idea of God, our anywhere and anytime capacity to grasp the personality and divinity factors of our highest concept of deity. We should be challenged by the immensity of God and comforted by our feeling for Him. And then that last paragraph, near the bottom of page 59, the consciousness of a victorious human life on earth is born of that creature faith which dares to challenge each recurring episode of existence when confronted with the awful spectacle of human limitations by the unfailing declaration, even if I cannot do this, there lives in me one who can and will do it, a part of the Father Absolute. Long before the ascenders reach Shavona, they've developed a battle cry, which the papers present as, quote, in liaison with God, nothing, absolutely nothing is impossible. These papers very seldom teach in a negative manner. But at the conclusion of this paper, section 5, at the bottom of page 59, they take off on the atonement concept. They simply go at it with hand grenades and bombs. They just pronounce it to be blasphemous on the character of God. You know, I always remember this whole sacrificial idea came home to me as a little boy. I got my religious training from my mother. I once could recite all the judges in Israel and so on. And I had a child's book of the Bible. And I always remember the woodcut at the end of one of the chapters. And it showed little Ikey tied down on the rock. And above him was old Abe poised with that wicked-looking knife. And the angel had gotten there in a Buck Rogers photo finish, you know. And the argument I gave my mother was, but suppose the angel had been late. I mean, I was little Ikey, you know. And Abe was my old man. And Mother said, but the angel wasn't late. I said, but suppose. And she could never sell me on any idea which would put a little boy in that kind of a jam with his dad, you know?
You didn't buy it?
I didn't buy it. I would have no part of that whatsoever. Thinking men and women are not going to buy the kind of a God who gets mad at men. Yeah. As the papers point out, when they get into the discussion of sacrifice, they say the celestial personalities may occasionally have intervened to prevent those things, but they certainly never egg them on. Well, more about that in the evolution of religion. I think paper 5 is the most intimate of the 5 discussions on God, and it should be, because they're talking about God's relation to us. They're talking about the approach to God, His presence. What is true worship? What is His relation to religion? How does one become conscious of God? And then, in the very last section, they introduce this radically new concept of personality as a 4th reality. Not matter, not mind, not spirit, but something yet again, something which God gives. I like this statement. God provides for the sovereign choice of all true personalities. No personal creature can be coerced into the eternal adventure. The portal of eternity opens only in response to the free will choice of the free will sons of the God of free will. This is first and last a family. What does God get out of this? Love, freely given. And as near as I can see, that's all He wants. In one place, the author of this group of papers says, if it were possible to divest God of all His tremendous powers, I think we would still love Him just as much because of what He is. I think you might appropriately note down some cross-references here, if you will. In this section on the God of personality, cross-reference page 106. Let's take a little time out at this point. We'll skip it. On page 106, they continue a discussion of personality because they are discussing the relationship of the infinite spirit to personality. And if you look at the 3rd from the last paragraph, very interesting. God bestows personality by His personal free will. Why He does so, we can only conjecture. How He does so, we do not know. Neither do we know why the 3rd source bestows non-Father personality. But this the infinite Spirit does in His own behalf, in creative conjunction with the Eternal Son, and in numerous ways unknown to you. The infinite Spirit can also act for the Father in the bestowal of first source personality. Let's take a little time out right now and talk about personality, as we're going to talk about matter, mind, spirit, space, time as we encounter them. There are basically 2 types of creatures who have free will choice. Type 1 possesses Father personality, and they may get that personality direct from the Universal Father, or the conjoined actor may give it to them. Look at it this way. Think of personality as being like money in the bank. God signs on the account. He's also made the infinite Spirit an attorney in fact. The infinite Spirit can sign checks on the Father's checking account and bestow personality for the Father. Yes.
Does he do that very often? Give a friend.
For a moment, this kind of personality, which is non-father, what they call in here third source personality. Third source personalities have free will choice, but they are not in the father's personality circuit. And we know some examples. The power centers are third source personalities, but are not in the father's personality circuit. I've said power centers, not master physical controllers. Some of them are not personal. But all of the power centers have free will. They're highly volitional. The associate power directors have free will. But some of their subordinates on the lower levels of the master physical controllers do not have personality. They are living, intelligent machines. Going back again to page 70, section 6, the God of Personality, there is a second important cross-reference I think you should make. Is this helpful to you? When we hit personality, we'll spend some time on it.
What was your last?
191, to the end of that paper. This is the last half of the paper on the seven master spirits. And it starts with a discussion of cosmic mind. It goes on into a discussion of morals, virtue, and personality. It goes on to a discussion of Urantia personality, and concludes with a discussion of the reality of human consciousness. You see, when you try to deal with personality as we know it, you've just almost got to deal with mind at the same time. Because our personality functions in the mind arena. And you can best see personality by observing its function. And when it functions, you're dealing with mind, personal mind. It's in this discussion that they point out that personal mind, or that mind, has three inalienable qualities. Quality number one, the mathematical response of mind. All human civilizations develop mathematics and produce science of some quality. Number two, the moral or duty response of mind. All civilizations evolve some form of justice. And number three, the worshipful response of mind. All civilizations evolve religions of one kind or another. Civilizations come, civilizations go, cultures rise and fall, but these qualities are expressed in each succeeding civilization because they're basic and constitutive in mind. On page 194, they take inventory of 7 functions of human mind because it is personal mind. Here is personality in action in the human mind. These are the functions of the relative free will of a human being. Moral decision, spiritual choice, unselfish love, group loyalty, cosmic insight, the attempt to do God's will, and the pursuit of divine values. This is what mind can do because it's personal mind. Deity is the concept of I am. I am what I am. I am that I am. God is. Deity is. And deity is unchanging. And in many senses, deity continues to be unchanging, unaltered by the events of time, impervious even to the cycles of eternity. Well, it's something which could be. We folks are alive today. It's a dead cinch that 1,000 years from now, none of us will be here, right? And if we don't blow up this planet, there will be people here, correct? These people are potential, aren't they? They're not here, but obviously they're possible. 1,000 years ago, we weren't here. But we were potential, or we couldn't be here now. Right? In a certain sense, a seed is the potential of the plant. One of the cutest statements I ever read was in an analysis of genetics, and it says, a hen is an egg's way of making another egg. If you go into the paper, Deity and Reality, you have the best discussion in the Urantia papers. I'll give you the page, and I just assumed you wouldn't look at it right now. But if you want to note right opposite the word potential, 1152 to 57. These different words involve sequence relationships. And here's where we get our fried egg concept. And for the moment, I want to use time language. Let's just remember, it didn't happen in time. But if we don't discuss it in sequence, it isn't going to register, right? We got to get from English to Bantu. When I think of static deity, I think of a fried egg. This is the I am. Potentials have not yet differentiated from actuals. As the papers describe it, this is the hypothetical static moment of eternity. That's the language used in the cross-reference I gave you. But the papers do not validate what the philosophers and the metaphysicians call monism, which is not a fried egg, but a scrambled egg. And that's a big difference. In a scrambled egg, you've got just a oneness, right? But in a fried egg, you've got a nucleus and a cytoplasm. The nucleus is the yellow part. The cytoplasm is the white. Always, even in the hypothetical static moment, in the beginning of beginnings, before the beginning of beginnings, there was always the possibility for self-will. When you differentiate potentials from actuals, again, I've got to have real childlike simple symbols to get them. You know what happened? The yolk moved out away from the white. How many of you separated yolks and whites? The yolk moved away from the white. This is the creation, eventuation, appearance of possibility. Something could happen now. And of course, the minute the yolk moved away from the white, you don't have two realities. You have three realities. You have the white, you have the yolk, and you have the relationship between the white and the yolk. Doesn't the fried egg help? I mean, you just can't be afraid of a concept of a fried egg. Yolk moved away from the static situation. In so moving, the yolk demonstrated volition and also qualified itself. It took up a new position. The white never moved, did it? And was never qualified. Hence is unqualified. And since we are dealing with absolute realities, here I think is the genetic derivation of the term unqualified absolute. Unqualified because it's never moved. And at this point, the white became an it, because the personal potentials were in the yolk. When you take the yolk away from the white, you rob it of all deity and personality qualities. Henceforth, the unqualified is it, not he. The yolk. What name shall we give the yolk? I like the term qualified absolute. It's used in the papers. Rarely. And what do we name the relationship between the white and the yolk? The papers give us the name. Universal absolute. Whose function it is to interrelate the tensions, the relationships between the qualified absolute and the unqualified absolute. And here is the beginning of the separation of deity and non-deity. The unqualified absolute is static reality minus all that is deity. The qualified absolute contains within itself the seeds of deity manifestation. Volition is inherent in the yolk. Response inherent in the white, the cytoplasm, the unqualified absolute. You know, one of the shrewdest criticisms of the book of Genesis was written by an old Zoroastrian theologian. It's in the Pahlavi texts. In this old Persian, Zoroastrian, pre-Mohammedan of course, is saying, this story of creation is for the birds. God was not alone. Because when he commanded, something happened, and this means that there was also present an obeyer of commands. How about that? And I think that's a pretty good definition of the unqualified absolute. When deity speaks with an absolute voice, the commands are obeyed by the unqualified absolute. Or, putting it this way, when total deity takes snuff, the unqualified absolute sneezes.